New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia are waking up to widespread fire damage. We know properties have been lost. We know many towns are without power, but the true extent is being assessed right now. And we're being warned the fight is far from over. Crews on the front line still battling against unpredictable conditions. We have reporters across the country ready to bring you the latest advice. Sarah Stewart begins our coverage.
They predicted a horror day and night. A bushfire emergency on the biggest scale our nation has ever seen. 3 states caught up in a mega firefight. On the New South Wales south coast near Nowra, a blaze that had been building for weeks.
Yeah, we need to get out of here.
The fire jumping the Shoalhaven River, burning either side of the Princes Highway.
Scared witless.
A close call for a group of fireys at St George's Basin, nearly outrun by a lightning-fast blaze.
Out on the ground, and then it just came, so we just got back to the truck, activated the emergency sprays and poured it in.
Further south, and thick, dry forest ignited along the Clyde River, surrounding Bateman's Bay. Those who hadn't evacuated told to seek shelter or get to the water.
Just pretty much banding together, mate, all of us as a group and looking after each other.
An almost otherworldly glow overtook Narooma, a blood orange haze in a usually bustling tourist haven.
Everyone's left town, just about.
Inland in the small apple-growing town of Batlow, the fire tore down on homes, gas cylinders exploding at a local petrol station.
Everybody in this town is a hero. Everybody.
Over the border and Victoria couldn't escape, contending with a new Black Saturday. The skies over Malakuta turning pitch black in the middle of the afternoon.
Very eerie and it's incredible, isn't it?
Relief as the first evacuees disembarked in Port Hastings after 20 hours at sea.
It's quite nice to be on solid ground again.
But frustration for others. Parents with young children and the elderly this morning still waiting for a chopper, yesterday unable to fly in thick smoke.
Lou's just come down with smoke-induced laryngitis, so he's sort of pretty croaky and pretty miserable today.
Residents in Omeo and Swifts Creek luckier. 50 people flown out of bushfire zones by the ADF. Fears blazes burning either side of the border will merge to create a mega blaze. In South Australia, it was an inferno described as virtually unstoppable.
Keep pushing through. We're doing okay directly behind you, but you need to keep pushing through.
The fire claiming the lives of a father and son, discovered in a burnt-out car.
It's got around very fast and it's just disbelief, total disbelief of something like this could happen.
A third of the island wiped out, 150,000 hectares burnt through, even destroying a luxury resort. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is still copping widespread criticism, accused of putting PR before people. At this stage, there's no sign of the fires going anywhere.
One of the worst hit areas is Eden, south of Bega, on the border between New South Wales and Victoria, where an out-of-control fire is threatening lives. Liz Daniels is in Merimbula, about half an hour north of Eden. Liz, the evacuation centre there has been evacuated. Do we know the scale of the damage yet?
Tracy, it's really hard to know what has happened overnight. That fire has burnt out emergency level, and here in Merimbula at Club Sapphire behind me, no doubt many have had a very sleepless night. The terror began about 7 o'clock when it became apparent that those who'd gathered in Eden from those surrounding areas as that blaze crept from Malakuta across the Victorian border, that those in Eden who had been evacuated to there were no longer safe to stay. And in a symbol of what's been an unpredictable crisis, the evacuation centre had to be evacuated. So those people were all brought either here to Merimbula or across to Bega, where they would be safer. Now, they've escaped the danger of the fire front, but it's still ominous signs here in Merimbula that there's seriously thick smoke. There's ash been falling, raining ash all night. The ground is covered in black soot. We've seen particles as big as that falling on cars are covered. The gutters are full of ash. So this fire and the scary nature of how ferocious that fire is, fanned by that blustery southerly yesterday afternoon, is still very real here in Merimbula.
All right, Liz, thank you very much for the update.
To Nowra now, which is 2 hours south of Sydney, and there are reports multiple homes have been lost as major highways are shut, isolating towns and trapping thousands in the disaster zone. Let's go to Today reporter Gabrielle Boyle. And Gabby, I mean, there are very real fears this morning that the fire will hit the tourist town of Kangaroo Valley.
Yeah, there certainly are. The fear always was that this fire would jump the Shoalhaven River and head into the mountains behind me, inching up close to Kangaroo Valley. And that's exactly what happened yesterday afternoon. Day turned to night. We were here at this same intersection because there's roadblocks right around this area, south, west and north of Nowra. And effectively all they were doing is pulling crews back out of these streets and finding higher ground because it was simply too dangerous to be in there to protect these homes. What I can tell you this morning is that the fire has jumped over the mountain and it is burning through the back of Kangaroo Valley. It hasn't hit the township of Kangaroo Valley itself, however, but anyone that's familiar with that area will know it's leafy, it's green, and at the moment, because of the drought, it is incredibly dry, tinder dry. So they were really trying to avoid that fire making its way through that area closer to residential properties. There is some good news, however. This morning it has cooled quite a bit. It's actually quite crisp this morning. Yesterday, absolutely sweltering, but today, much calmer. We're expecting a top of 22 degrees here with some light winds. They will be a bit unpredictable, southeasterly winds, but it is nothing like what we saw yesterday. What we're going to see later on this morning is these roads that go in and around these residential and semi-rural areas will reopen to fire crews and they'll go back in and assess the extent of the damage. I can tell you that it is very likely that a few k's up the road from here, houses will be lost, but it is dense bushland and it's just too hard to tell at this early stage.
OK, and we'll stay across this today. Thanks, Gabby.
Meantime, properties have been lost in the small apple-growing town of Batlow. Montana Duncan joins me now from the nearby town of Tumut. Montana, good morning to you. What is the feeling there this morning?
Yes, good morning. Well, it is very eerie here, and as you can see, thick smoke is swallowing Tumut at the moment. We have been stopped here because it is simply too dangerous to move forward. Crews have told us that the fire is still very volatile and unpredictable. So we do know that Batlow was hit particularly hard in the catastrophic conditions yesterday. We do know that properties have been lost, but the RFS say it is simply too early to tell exactly how many. And that's the goal for them today, taking advantage of the cooler, calmer conditions. They're going to send in teams. They're going to send in teams to assess that damage as well as set up containment lines to try and make today that little bit easier.
Montana, thank you.
Well, the people of Cooma have been on high alert for fires, but never imagined they'd be flooded when a reservoir burst, sending more than 1 million litres of water crashing down on homes. Tiffany Genders is across this. Tiff, how did this happen?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, Tracy. The people here at Molong Place are very keen to find out how this tank simply buckled, sending a torrent of water, mud and debris into their homes. It was just after 9 o'clock last night when the residents here heard what they thought was thunder. The next thing, they were inundated. One house in particular bore the brunt of it. A husband, wife and their 2 little girls were inside when the doors ripped off and 1 million litres or more came crashing in.
It just sounded like thunder, and she just come down the hill there and flooded us. We thought we were going to get burnt out. We got flooded. It blew the back doors off the house and we couldn't open the front doors to get the water out. Kids were floating around the living room on couches.
An elderly woman in her 90s was rescued from knee-deep water in another house. She's okay, but is in hospital as a precaution. The clean-up here will be mammoth. Now, the reservoir was being used to fill to the brim to help with these fires. Just how it burst is now subject to a big investigation.
All right, Tiffany, thank you.
In Batemans Bay, power has been cut to more than 30,000 homes, with fire crews fearing the worst, unable to inspect the extent of the damage. Let's go to Today reporter Lara Vella. And Lara, evacuation centres are overflowing there.
Yeah, Ali, this one at Bateman's Bay, well, it's chock-a-block. There are hundreds of people who have called this place their home away from home once again, and understandably, they are absolutely exhausted. They're anxious, and right about now, they're also pretty desperate for fresh food and fruit and vegetables, because things that you and I would normally take for granted, like bread, fresh milk, apples, broccoli, things like that, even diesel, they have become luxury commodities here because either the shops have sold out or the shops have been closed as a result of the fire threat. Now overnight are only adding to these weary people's frustrations. The power in this area, in fact to around 30,000 residents, has once again gone out. So if you don't have a generator, well, people here, they plunged into darkness. They had to make best with what they could, including the torches on their mobile phones, and that's exactly what myself and our crew had to do this morning at Moruya because our power there was cut as well. Now today, most likely, we will probably see a mass exodus from a lot of these evacuation centres across the south coast because, quite remarkably, conditions have improved. It's a lot cooler. We are also expecting rain over the next couple of days. The problem, though, with these people trying to make their way out today is we will most likely see the same scenes that we saw just a few days ago because the traffic, it is going to be an absolute nightmare. There are road closures still in place. So, Ali and Carl, unfortunately, it's going to be another very, very long and tiring day for these people who just want to get back to their usual lives.
Yeah, of course, but I must say I did like that you mentioned the word rain in there, Lara. We haven't been hearing too much of that. Thanks.
Rain and cooler. Good, huh? Well, Australian Defence Force troops are providing support in bushfire disaster zones. A convoy of trucks is leaving Sydney's Holsworthy Army Barracks shortly to assist residents on the south coast. The Navy's largest vessel, HMAS Adelaide, will arrive at Victoria's Mallacoota this afternoon with emergency supplies, joining two other ships providing aid in the area. Up to 8 aircraft will also help. There's fears the Green Wattle Creek fire on the outskirts of Sydney's west is making its way towards the Blue Mountains. The out-of-control bushfire is threatening to jump containment lines, possibly wiping out entire suburbs. Water bomber aircraft are supporting fire crews on the ground, trying to stop the blaze crossing the Warragamba Dam. To Victoria now, and residents have suffered through a night of uncertainty. 40 fires are burning out of control and 11 emergency warnings are in place. In the small town of Omeo in East Gippsland, the Army rescued 50 people from the fire front, with small children and dogs taken to safety. Dozens of homes are feared lost overnight and 6 people remain missing. 15 people have been located. Conditions will begin to ease today. Well, let's go now to Mimi Becker in Mallacoota, where things again looked bleak yesterday afternoon, didn't they? Mimi, hundreds are still stranded. When are they going to be able to leave?
Carl, it still very much is a nervous wait for those families left behind here in Mallacoota, and that's because a number of air evacuations were cancelled yesterday. They were for the elderly and young families with children under 5. The conditions were incredibly eerie. We saw red skies roll across town, and then at around 2:30 in the afternoon, it turned pitch black. So it certainly was very scary for the people down here, as they had seen similar scenes just days ago. Now, the Navy has decided to return MV Sycamore to Mallacoota to try and rescue those families and elderly left behind. That ship is expected to arrive mid-morning, but there's no guarantee as to when it will leave due to rougher conditions at sea today. Carl?
They're doing it tough there. Mimi, thank you. Tracy?
Well, there are serious fears 2 fires will join and create a catastrophic mega blaze on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Stephanie Anderson is in Bright. Steph, what's the feeling there? Will this happen today?
Well, Tracy, I spoke to the State Control Centre just a short time ago, and they confirmed that authorities are feeling hopeful that some cooler temperatures and less wind today will provide some more favourable conditions out there on the fire front. Now, the one that is causing concern is in Corryong in the northeast of Victoria. Yesterday, the focus there was simply on preserving life and property. So obviously, fire breaks and containment lines will be key today to stop these 2 fires merging. It is still burning at emergency level, though, and the township is still very much under threat, so there's a lot of work ahead there. I'm southwest of that fire here in Bright. Now, this town is normally chock-a-block with tourists at this time of year. When we arrived last night, it's all but deserted. It is full of smoke that is so strong when you walk outside it makes your eyes sting. So essentially, in this part of Victoria, there's hopes high that Mother Nature will give some reprieve today because there's still a lot of work ahead.
A lot of hope there. All right, Stephanie, thank you.
There's been a night of patchy rain on Kangaroo Island. The small downpour overnight has been a huge help for firefighters. However, water supplies are still very low for residents after a treatment plant was damaged. The flames have wiped out about a third of the island, including homes and even a world-class holiday resort. The southerly change, which tore through the south coast, has brought fierce winds to Sydney, tearing down trees and cutting off power. Already strapped emergency crews have responded to more than 100 calls for assistance. The weather station at Cornell recorded gusts of 104 kilometres an hour. The wind will slowly weaken throughout the day. It'll be 29 degrees in Penrith. That is a stark 20-degree drop from record-breaking temperatures yesterday. There's a lengthy wait on WA's border with South Australia as a major bushfire blocks the road link there. 2 first aid posts have been set up on Air Highway with drivers stranded on either side of the blockage.